The attic was always a place I avoided, not because it frightened me, but because it belonged to my mother. She stored boxes there like they were secrets, layers of her life she never unpacked and never explained. After her funeral, when the silence of the house pressed down on me heavier than grief itself, I climbed up the creaky ladder and let the stale air of dust and mothballs wrap around me. That was when I found the journal. It was tucked beneath a pile of old quilts, wrapped in a thin piece of linen as though it was something sacred. The leather cover was cracked, the corners worn soft by years of being handled in secret. My chest tightened when I opened it and saw my mother's handwriting. The script was unmistakable, sharp, deliberate, but restless, as if the ink couldn't keep up with her thoughts. I expected notes on finances, recipes, maybe her private reflections about my sister Claire and me. Instead, the first line I read felt like ice pressed against my skin. My son is gone, but why do I still feel he breathes somewhere beyond my sight? I froze. My breath snagged in my throat. Everyone knew the story. My older brother, Daniel, had died before I was born. It was a family tragedy whispered in fragments, a wound my mother rarely acknowledged. She spoke of him rarely, only in brief, brittle sentences that ended before questions could begin. To me, he was nothing more than a ghost of memory, a faded photograph I had seen once, hidden in a drawer, of a boy with wide eyes and a crooked smile. Yet here was my mother, in her own words, confessing doubt. Page after page, she returned to it. They told me he slipped away in his sleep. Yet I heard him cry that night. I swore I did. My fingers trembled as I turned the pages. The entries spanned years, her doubts never silenced. She wrote about footsteps in the hallway when no one should have been awake, about toys shifting positions in Daniel's old room, about faint tapping at the window that she told herself was just branches in the wind. But the most chilling lines weren't about ghosts. They were about her certainty that someone, somewhere, had taken him from her. What mother hears her child's voice years after the grave? Either I am mad, or he is not where they said he lay. My heart pounded against my ribs. For a moment, I convinced myself this was grief speaking, the madness of loss captured in ink. But then I turned to the entry dated 10 years after his supposed death, when she wrote, "If Daniel still lives, then everything I have built, everything I plan to leave behind, belongs to more than one. The inheritance must be divided. I cannot pretend otherwise." I sat frozen in the dim light of the attic, my thoughts reeling. The inheritance, my mother's house, her land, the assets she had quietly amassed without ever telling us the full truth of what she owned. Claire and I had always believed we were the only heirs. But now this journal whispered of a third shadow, Daniel, the brother who might not have died at all. A sudden creak beneath me jolted me from the page. The rafters groaned, and for the first time the attic didn't feel like a storage space, but a chamber that breathed with me. I looked around, my pulse racing, and for a fleeting second I thought I saw a movement in the far corner where the shadows pooled thickest. My mind scrambled for sense. It was just the dust, the shifting light of the setting sun, my imagination stirred by words I wasn't ready to believe. Still, I felt it, that someone was listening. I snapped the journal shut, clutching it against my chest. I whispered into the heavy silence, "Daniel?" The word tasted foreign, like calling a name that should have belonged only to memory. No answer came, but the silence wasn't empty either. It pressed back, thick, like it was considering me. I shook myself, stood quickly, and nearly tripped over the quilts. The journal weighed heavy in my hands. I wanted to throw it back, bury it under the blankets, and pretend I had never seen it. But I couldn't. My mother had hidden it for a reason, and now that I had seen inside, I could never unsee. As I made my way down the ladder, I heard something that stopped me cold, a sound from below, faint but distinct. A door shutting. My breath hitched. The house was supposed to be empty. Claire had gone home hours ago, and I had locked the front door behind me. My grip on the journal tightened. My ears strained in the silence that followed, listening for footsteps, for movement, for anything. Nothing. Slowly, I stepped onto the hallway floorboards, which groaned under my weight. I moved from room to room, peering into the living room, the kitchen, the study. Nothing. And yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. At last, I set the journal on the dining table, its leather cover gleaming faintly in the dim light. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I sat down, opened it again, and forced myself to keep reading, because whatever waited in those pages was more dangerous to ignore than to confront. I found entries where my mother mentioned names I didn't recognize, strangers she suspected, people she believed had known something about Daniel's disappearance. One name appeared several times, circled in the margin as though she had intended to follow up. E. Carter. Next to it she had scrawled, "The one who came the night Daniel vanished." A chill swept over me. Whoever E. Carter was, my mother had connected them to the night she lost her son. And if she was right, then Daniel's death had never been an accident at all. My eyes stung, my chest heavy with a grief that wasn't mine but still lived in my blood. The journal's final entry was dated just a month before her death. If my fears are true, then one day they will find out. My daughters will learn the shadow of their brother was never buried. And when they do, the truth will tear them apart. I sat back, my mind reeling. Claire had to know. But even as the thought formed, dread slithered into me. If I told her, it wouldn't just be grief we'd be dealing with. It would be suspicion, division, and a battle over everything our mother had left behind. For the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if Claire was my ally or if, when faced with the possibility of another heir, she'd turn against me. The house creaked again, and I looked up sharply. The air felt colder now. Somewhere in the distance, faintly, I thought I heard the echo of a child's laugh. The next morning the house felt different, like the shadows had settled deeper into the corners, carrying with them all the secrets my mother had kept locked away. I hadn't slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the faint echo of that laugh, and each time it sounded closer. When the sun rose, I convinced myself it had been exhaustion, nerves, maybe even the creaking of an old house tricking my mind. But the journal lay on the table where I had left it, its leather cover like a wound waiting to be reopened, and I knew pretending it didn't exist was no longer an option. Claire came by just after breakfast, her keys jangling as she let herself in. She looked tired, her hair pulled back hastily, dark circles under her eyes. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, setting her bag down. "It's this house. Feels heavier now that Mom's gone, doesn't it?" I hesitated, my heart pounding as I debated telling her about the journal. But something in her eyes stopped me, the way they darted around the room, not quite meeting mine, as though she was already carrying something she hadn't confessed. Instead, I asked, "Did Mom ever talk to you about Daniel?" Claire stiffened. Her lips parted slightly before she said, carefully, "Not really. Just that it was hard for her." "Why?" I studied her face for a long moment before shaking my head. Just wondering. I couldn't bring myself to trust her with the journal yet. Not until I understood it better myself. After she left, promising to return later to help sort through boxes, I opened the journal again and searched for more about this E. Carter. My mother's notes were fragmented, scattered across years, but they painted a disturbing picture. Mentions of a man who had visited the house the night Daniel was said to have died, whispers of hushed conversations my mother never explained, and a fear that gnawed at her even decades later. The name meant nothing to me, but my gut told me it mattered. I decided to dig. First, I went to the basement where Mom kept old files and documents in locked metal cabinets. The key was easy enough to find taped under a shelf, and inside I discovered folders stacked in neat piles, birth certificates, property deeds, tax forms. Tucked between them was a thin envelope with handwriting I didn't recognize. It was addressed to my mother, postmarked 20 years ago. My hands shook as I slid the letter out. The return address was smeared, unreadable, but the name signed at the bottom made my stomach lurch. E. Carter. The letter was brief, almost cryptic. I kept my promise. He is safe. Do not come looking. My knees buckled, and I gripped the edge of the cabinet to keep from collapsing. Safe. He. There was no mistaking who the letter referred to. My brother. My mother hadn't been mad with grief, she had known, and she had chosen silence. Anger rose hot in my chest, mingling with the shock. Why would she hide this from us? Why would she allow Claire and me to live our whole lives believing Daniel was dead? Before I could think further, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Panic shot through me. I stuffed the letter back into the envelope, shoved it into my pocket, and locked the cabinet again. Claire's footsteps echoed upstairs. "I'm back," she called. I forced my breathing steady and climbed up quickly, plastering a calm expression onto my face. But Claire's eyes immediately zeroed in on me, sharp and suspicious. "What were you doing down there?" she asked. "Just sorting paperwork," I said lightly, but my voice sounded too thin. She narrowed her eyes, then crossed her arms. "If you find anything about Mom's finances, we need to go through it together. I don't want any surprises." Something in the way she said it sent a chill down my spine. I wondered if she already knew more than she let on, if she too had stumbled on fragments of our mother's hidden truth. That night, when Claire finally left, I sat at the dining table with the journal open, the letter burning a hole in my pocket. My thoughts whirled so violently I couldn't sit still. I needed answers. I needed to know if Daniel was alive. I called the local records office the next morning, pretending to be researching for genealogy, and asked about death certificates from the year Daniel had supposedly died. After a long pause and the shuffle of papers, the clerk said, "We don't have a record of a Daniel in that year. Are you sure of the date?" My blood ran cold. I hung up quickly, unable to speak. The official records didn't list him, which meant one of two things. Either his death had never been reported, or it had been erased. As I sat there, staring at the journal, a sudden bang from upstairs made me jump. It was loud, heavy, like something falling. Heart racing, I ran up the stairs and into the hall. The doors were all closed, the house still, but the sound had been unmistakable. Slowly, I turned the knob to my mother's bedroom. Inside, the window was open, curtains billowing in the wind. The vanity drawer stood ajar, though I hadn't touched it in weeks. Inside, resting on top of the neatly arranged brushes and hairpins, was a small toy car. Old, metal, the paint chipped. I knew it instantly from the single photograph I'd once seen of Daniel's room. It had been his. My throat went dry. I picked it up with trembling fingers, whispering, "How?" The air felt heavy again, pressing against me, almost suffocating. For a fleeting moment, I thought I heard footsteps behind me, soft and deliberate, but when I spun around, the hallway was empty. The toy car felt cold in my hand, colder than it should have been. I clutched it, heart hammering, and whispered the name again. "Daniel." No answer came, but the silence didn't feel empty. It felt watchful. That night, as I sat awake staring at the journal, I realized I couldn't keep this secret any longer. Claire had to know, but telling her meant opening a door I wasn't sure we'd be able to close again. Because if Daniel was alive, or if someone wanted us to believe he was, then the inheritance, the house, the money, everything we thought was ours, belonged to him too. And in that realization, I understood the stakes. The truth could unite us, or it could destroy us. The next day began with the kind of silence that doesn't comfort but unsettles, the silence that makes you feel like someone is holding their breath just out of sight. I carried the toy car in my pocket, unable to leave it behind in my mother's room, though every time my fingers brushed against its cold metal, a shiver passed through me. Claire arrived again just after noon, a folder of documents tucked under her arm. Her eyes scanned me with a mixture of exhaustion and suspicion, as though she sensed I was keeping something from her. And she was right. "We should go through the estate papers together," she said, placing the folder on the dining table. "Mom wasn't as transparent as she should have been. Some of these accounts don't add up." I tried to steady my voice. "What do you mean?" Claire opened the folder, spreading papers across the table. "There are withdrawals, large ones, over the years. But there's no explanation, no receipts. It's like money was vanishing." My pulse quickened. Could it have been going to Daniel? To whoever had kept him hidden? I said nothing, afraid my voice would betray me. Claire leaned closer, her tone sharper. "If you find anything, and I mean anything, you tell me. No secrets. Agreed?" I forced a nod. Agreed. But the journal and the letter from E. Carter burned in my mind. That evening, after Claire left again, I couldn't stand the walls of the house any longer. I tucked the journal into my bag and drove to the library in town. The smell of dust and paper grounded me, steadied the storm inside. I searched old newspaper archives, typing in Daniel with our last name, the year of his death, anything that might bring answers. Hours passed, my eyes aching from scrolling reels of microfilm, until finally an article flashed before me. Local family mourns infant son. There was a photo of my mother and father, young and hollow-eyed, but what caught my attention wasn't the headline. It was the last paragraph. "No official cause of death has been released. The family has asked for privacy." No cause of death. No details. Just silence. My chest tightened. I copied the article, folded it into my bag, and was about to leave when an older librarian approached. "You've been digging a long time," she said softly. Her glasses glinted in the fluorescent light. "Who are you researching?" I hesitated, then whispered, "My brother, Daniel." The woman's eyes flickered with something, recognition, maybe even fear. She lowered her voice. "You must be Margaret's daughter." My throat went dry. "You knew her?" "Everyone knew her," the woman said carefully. But not everyone knew what she carried. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "There were rumors, back then, about a man who came to the hospital that night. Some said the baby never died at all. Some said he was taken." My heart lurched. "Taken? By who?" She shook her head. "I don't know, but your mother asked questions." And then she stopped. Her eyes softened. "Be careful, child. Some truths are heavier than grief." Her warning clung to me as I left, the journal heavy in my bag. That night, I sat at the table and reread the letter from E. Carter. My mother's notes, the missing money, the librarian's words, they all pointed to one thing. Daniel had been alive. Someone had taken him, and my mother had known, maybe even cooperated, though why she had stayed silent I couldn't fathom. But then came the knock. Soft, deliberate, echoing through the empty house. My stomach twisted. I rose slowly, heart pounding, and opened the door. A man stood there, middle-aged, tall, his face worn but familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. His eyes were dark, heavy with something I couldn't read. "You don't know me," he said quietly, "but I knew your mother." My breath hitched. "Who are you?" His gaze flicked past me, into the house, as though searching for shadows. "Name's Carter. Edward Carter." The world tilted. My legs felt weak, my fingers numb. The name from the journal, from the letter, from my mother's obsession, was standing in front of me. "Why are you here?" I whispered. He studied me for a long moment, then said, "Because it's time you knew the truth. About your brother." He asked to come inside, and though every instinct screamed not to trust him, I stepped back and let him in. He carried himself like a man burdened by secrets too heavy to hold any longer. Sitting at the table, his hands clasped together, he looked down before speaking. "Your mother wasn't wrong. Daniel didn't die that night." My chest seized, but I forced the words out. "Then where is he?" Carter's jaw tightened. "Alive. Raised far from here. Safer that way." "Safer?" My voice cracked. "From what? From us?" He shook his head slowly. "From the truth. There were people who wanted him gone. Your mother was given a choice, bury his son, or lose more than that." I struggled to breathe, my pulse roaring in my ears. "So you took him?" Carter's eyes flickered with guilt. "I kept him, raised him as my own. But he always knew he wasn't mine. He knows he has a family here." My hand trembled as I gripped the edge of the table. "Then why now? Why tell me this now?" Carter's voice dropped. "Because he's coming back, whether you're ready or not." The words crashed into me like thunder. My brother, alive, returning. And with him, the shattering of everything Claire and I thought we knew. The inheritance, the family, even the house we sat in. Nothing would be the same. I thought of Claire, of how she would react, of how quickly love could twist into suspicion, sister against sister, once the truth spilled out. Carter's eyes met mine, steady and unflinching. "But know this," he said. "Not everyone will be glad to see him." The air between us thickened, heavy with dread. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just about family. It was about survival. Night seemed heavier that week, like the walls themselves were suffocating her. Anna had locked herself in the old house for 3 days, poring over every page of her mother's journal again and again, circling words, underlining names, trying to find some hidden code. The entry about the brother who had supposedly died in childhood had taken over her mind. The way her mother had written it, hesitant, broken, with phrases like, "if he is really gone," and "I sometimes hear him still," planted a poisoned seed of doubt that grew into an obsession. She tried calling her sister Lena, but Lena no longer answered. The last argument they had was brutal. Lena screamed at her to stop digging into ghosts, that she was tearing the family apart with fantasies. And when Anna tried to show her the pages, Lena slammed the door in her face. Alone, with no one to believe her, Anna turned to the box of old family documents she had retrieved from the attic. There, tucked inside brittle envelopes, she found hospital records. Something didn't add up. The dates of her mother's stay overlapped with the supposed burial of the child. And strangest of all, there was no official death certificate, only a letter from a doctor with a vague note. The matter is closed. Anna's chest tightened. The collapse began not with screams or violence, but with silence, the silence of uncertainty that made her doubt her own sanity. One night, she heard noises in the empty house. At first, she thought it was the wind rattling the shutters, but then came soft, dragging footsteps from the hallway. Her blood froze. She grabbed the journal and clutched it like a weapon. "Lena," she whispered. No answer. The footsteps stopped. She ran to the door, opened it, and saw nothing but the dark corridor stretching like a throat. But when she turned back into her room, the journal lay open on a page she was sure she hadn't touched. And on it, in fresh ink that didn't match her mother's hand, a single sentence: "He is not gone." The walls closed in. Anna screamed until her voice cracked. By morning she was shaking, unable to decide if she had written it herself in some frenzy or if someone else was inside the house. When she tried to reach Lena again, her sister sent only one message: "Stop this madness, or I will cut you out of my life." The words were final, like a knife. With her sister gone, Anna felt her support system shatter. She turned to the lawyer handling the inheritance, desperate to confirm records. But even he avoided her questions, insisting the estate was meant for two, and that digging further would only cause legal chaos. That phrase, legal chaos, haunted her. Why would he be afraid of questions, unless there was something to hide? Yet every door she knocked on seemed to shut in her face. And the house itself, with its creaking bones and whispering corners, became her enemy. She began sleeping in the living room, too afraid to stay upstairs. Dreams plagued her, a boy's voice calling her name, a shadow hovering just beyond reach, her mother's face pale and pleading. Every time she woke, she felt drained, like the life was leaking from her veins. On the fourth night, she woke to see the silhouette of a boy at the end of the hall. His posture was oddly familiar, as if she had seen it in childhood photographs. But when she whispered, "Brother," the figure turned and dissolved into the dark. The collapse wasn't only around her, it was inside her. Paranoia grew like wildfire. She stopped eating, barely sleeping, convinced someone, or something, was watching. Even the journal, once her only guide, now mocked her. She started to notice lines that seemed to change, as if the ink rearranged itself depending on when she read them. Words like "third heir" and "truth buried alive" appeared, sending her spiraling deeper. She realized she could no longer tell what was real. By then, whispers had reached relatives. Cousins stopped taking her calls, claiming she was unstable. The more she insisted, the more she sounded insane. And she could feel the net tightening. The inheritance meeting was coming, and if she didn't prove the truth before then, Lena would take everything and brand her the mad sister. One stormy evening, in utter desperation, Anna searched the basement. Dust choked her throat. Cobwebs hung like curtains, but she pressed on with a single thought. Maybe there was evidence, something hidden by her mother. Behind a stack of rotting boxes, she found an old trunk with a broken lock. Inside were children's clothes, neatly folded, untouched by time. And beneath them, a tiny pair of shoes, too clean, too preserved to belong to someone dead decades ago. With trembling hands she lifted them, her breath shallow, her mind screaming. Was her brother still alive? Was he hidden somewhere, erased from records? Or was this all a cruel game her mother left behind? That night, Anna collapsed onto the cold basement floor, clutching the shoes and sobbing. The storm outside raged like her own mind. The walls shook, the windows howled, and she realized she had nothing left. No allies, no proof anyone would believe, no strength to keep fighting. Only the journal in her trembling hands and the shoes on her lap, mute artifacts of a truth that threatened to devour her. And then she heard it, close this time, unmistakable, a child's laugh echoing through the basement. The night of the inheritance meeting arrived with a weight that pressed against Anna's chest like a stone. She had barely slept, her eyes hollow, her hands trembling from days of paranoia. Yet she walked into the lawyer's office clutching the journal and the tiny shoes she had found in the basement, determined to confront everyone. Lena was already there, calm, composed, her makeup flawless, her tone sharp as steel. "You look like you've crawled out of a grave," Lena whispered coldly as Anna sat down. "If you try to embarrass me today with your ghost stories, I swear I'll destroy you." The lawyer shuffled papers, his discomfort visible, but Anna didn't care. She stood abruptly, her voice breaking. "There's a third heir. Our mother wrote about him. She never believed he was dead." She slammed the journal onto the table, flipping to the pages where the cryptic entries lay. Gasps echoed as relatives leaned forward. Lena's eyes narrowed, fury and fear mixing. "Stop this madness. He died as a baby. You're sick, Anna. Sick." But Anna pulled out the shoes, laying them beside the journal. Then why were these hidden in the basement? Preserved like he was meant to come back for them? The room fell silent. The lawyer's face went pale. His hands shook as he reached for the papers in front of him, fumbling as though trying to bury something quickly. Anna's gaze locked on him. "You knew, didn't you? That's why you kept saying the inheritance was for two. Because admitting a third would ruin everything." For a long moment, no one breathed. Then the lawyer snapped, slamming his fist on the desk. "Enough. This isn't your place to question. The estate is for you and your sister. End of story." His voice cracked with a desperation that betrayed him. Lena froze, her face betraying something Anna had never seen before: doubt. Suddenly, the office lights flickered. The atmosphere thickened, heavy, suffocating. Anna's skin prickled as if someone else had entered the room. A soft laugh, barely audible, slithered through the air. Her heart stopped. She wasn't the only one who heard it. Several relatives turned toward the door, eyes wide. The sound of small footsteps echoed down the corridor outside the office, approaching slowly, deliberately. Lena stood, her chair scraping violently. "This is a trick. Some sick trick." But her voice quivered. The footsteps grew louder. The door creaked open, but no one was there. Only the faint imprint of wet shoe prints appeared on the carpet, leading inside. Anna's body shook violently as tears welled in her eyes. "He's here," she whispered. "He never left." Panic erupted. Relatives rushed back, murmuring, crossing themselves. The lawyer tried to gather the papers, his composure collapsing, but his hands trembled too much. The wet footprints moved toward the table, one by one, then stopped beside Anna. She could feel a presence, a cold breath against her neck. Her knees almost gave out, but she clutched the shoes tightly. "Brother," she whispered, "if you're here, show them. Show them I'm not insane." The journal suddenly flipped open on its own, pages whipping as though struck by a storm. It stopped at a blank page, and before their horrified eyes, words began etching themselves in dark ink. "I am the third." The room erupted in screams. Lena backed against the wall, her face drained of blood. No, no, this can't be real. But Anna felt something different. Relief, vindication, a twisted kind of triumph. For the first time, the truth wasn't just hers. Everyone saw, yet the cost was unbearable. The lawyer, pale and sweating, whispered, "This changes everything. Legally, the estate belongs to three. But if he's not alive," his words faltered, because even he couldn't explain what had just unfolded. The presence grew heavier, oppressive. The laughter returned, darker this time, almost mocking. Anna realized too late. This wasn't the innocent child she had hoped for. This was something shaped by years of silence, secrets, and betrayal. The shadow of her brother wasn't here for love. He was here for vengeance. The lights flickered again, then went out completely, plunging the room into blackness. Chaos erupted. People screamed, chairs toppled, papers flew. In the dark, Anna felt a cold hand brush hers, snatching the shoes from her grip. She screamed, lunging, but the hand was gone. The air filled with the sound of tearing pages, the journal being ripped apart. When the lights finally came back, the shoes and the journal were gone. Only the wet footprints remained, leading to the window. And scrawled across the lawyer's documents, in dripping ink, were the words, "You will all pay." The climax had arrived, but it wasn't justice. It was judgment. The truth had shattered the family, and what lingered in that room was not a brother returned, but a curse unleashed. The following weeks were a blur of whispers, legal debates, and sleepless nights. The family that had once gathered around the same dinner table now avoided eye contact, each of them living in dread. Anna barely left her apartment, her mind replaying the night in the lawyer's office, the footprints, the laughter, the words carved in dripping ink. Some of the relatives tried to rationalize it. insisting it had been a trick, some elaborate act. But no one could explain the wet footprints that appeared even when no one was near, or the documents that went missing from the lawyer's office only to reappear torn and smeared with ink. Lena was a shadow of herself. The once perfect, untouchable sister now jumped at every sound, refused to sleep alone, and avoided Anna's calls. Yet Anna knew Lena had seen enough to understand. The shadow wasn't just haunting her. It was haunting them all. One evening, Anna returned home to find the tiny shoes on her doorstep. They were damp, mud-stained, and smelled faintly of mildew. No one could have placed them there. Her building had locked doors, and yet they sat waiting like an accusation. She brought them inside, trembling, and placed them on the kitchen table. "What do you want from us?" she whispered into the empty air. The lights flickered, and the temperature dropped. A faint voice, like a child's, whispered back, "What was mine?" Anna collapsed into tears. He wasn't just a shadow. He was a forgotten son, erased from history, stripped of what should have been his. Now he demanded it back. But what could she give him? A share of the inheritance? A grave? A name spoken aloud after decades of silence? The next morning, the lawyer called with grim news. The estate was frozen. No one could touch it until the matter of the third heir was resolved. But how do you resolve the claim of someone who doesn't officially exist? Worse, rumors began to spread in town. Neighbors swore they saw a boy standing outside the mother's old house, watching silently from the garden, vanishing when approached. Workers refused to enter the house to pack belongings, saying the halls echoed with the sound of a child running barefoot at night. The property, once a prize, now felt like cursed ground. Relatives turned on each other. Some blamed Anna for inviting the shadow by digging too deep into the journal. Others blamed Lena for trying to hide the truth. The lawyer, gaunt and sleepless, confessed in private that he had known something wasn't right, that years ago, their mother had whispered to him during the drafting of the will, "If he returns, don't deny him." He thought it was grief speaking. Now he wasn't so sure. Anna couldn't escape the feeling that her mother had known all along, that the journal wasn't just grief therapy, but a warning. The more Anna read the surviving fragments, the clearer it became. Her mother believed the boy was alive somewhere, that his death had been staged, or worse, covered up. But by whom? And why? Each night the presence grew stronger. Anna would wake to see the shoes moved across the room, tiny wet prints leading to her bed. Sometimes she would feel the weight of a child sitting at the foot of it, unseen but heavy enough to crease the blanket. Lena, desperate, finally came to Anna's apartment. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. "We can't live like this," she said, her voice breaking. "He's not leaving us alone. Maybe we should give him what he wants." "And what's that?" Anna asked, though deep down she knew. Lena swallowed hard. His name, his place in the family, the inheritance. Together they returned to the lawyer, demanding he amend the records. Against all logic, against every law, they insisted that the will acknowledge a third heir, the unnamed son. The lawyer argued, shouted, warned them it would bring scandal. But when the office door slammed shut on its own, and the journal leapt from a shelf, landing open on his desk, even he went pale with surrender. The official documents were altered. A third name was entered, unknown son. When the papers were signed, a heavy silence fell. For the first time in weeks, the air felt lighter. That night, Anna placed the shoes back in the old house, setting them neatly by the fireplace. "It's yours now," she whispered. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, faintly, she heard it, the soft patter of footsteps running through the hall, a child's laughter fading into the distance. She collapsed to her knees, weeping with relief. But the story didn't end there. The estate remained cursed, its value dropping as rumors of the haunting spread. No buyer would touch it. Relatives who had fought for riches now wanted nothing but escape. Lena left town entirely, vanishing without a word. The lawyer retired early, broken and pale. And Anna? She stayed. She couldn't leave. Sometimes she thought of him not as a curse, but as a brother who had been denied life, denied love, denied everything. She sat by the fireplace in the silent house, whispering stories into the air, imagining a boy listening. But sometimes, just sometimes, the laughter she heard wasn't childlike at all. It was darker, older, sharper. And on those nights, Anna realized the truth. Giving him his name had not freed them. It had given him power. And he wasn't finished.